Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello and welcome to episode 73 of the English with Kirsty podcast. And for anyone listening in December 2016, this is the last episode of 2016, and a lot of people are talking about like the best of the podcast or things like that, but I don't really want to do that, and neither do I want to do something about setting goals for 2017 because that's what a lot of people talk about as well. I want to look at something slightly different, and that's specifically about how you reach your goals, because having goals is a good thing, but sometimes we forget about how we get there, and that's what I want to look at today, specifically in relation to introverts, because I think that's something that we don't often talk about, the way that we have different ways of learning and different people enjoy different activities, and we may have the same goal, but we don't have to have the same way of getting there. And the reason I started thinking about this was because just before Christmas I went into London and I was on the tube, and it just reminded me of something that happened when I used to work in London. When I went through a particular station, sometimes random strangers would yell at me like, "You're going the wrong way!" And that was really annoying because I wasn't going the wrong way, and also how could they know I was going the wrong way if they didn't know where I was going? It was true that I was going a different way to most of the people around me, but I was doing that on purpose because I knew a shortcut, and the way that I was going meant that I could avoid a big open area with lots of people, lots of crowds, and it actually got me to where I was going faster, and for me it was a smarter way to go because you avoided all the crowds, but it did mean I was going in a different direction to most of the other people in the station, and so some people thought that, hey, I couldn't know where I was going, I must be lost. I wasn't. But so that started me thinking about, you know, how people can think that if you're not doing things the same way as everyone else, it's the wrong way. But that's not true. I had my guide dog with me at the time, and the way that I'd chosen was better for us because there were less people, she was less likely to get trodden on, and we would get to our destination quicker. So for us this was the right way, but it was just a bit of a different way. And that got me on to thinking about introverts and the way that we learn and the way that we do things differently sometimes, and that is what I want to talk about today. But if you're not an introvert or you don't identify as one, still think about your language goals that you may have for the coming year or the next step that you want to take, because really what you want to achieve is more important than how you get there, and how you get there is something to think about because you want to find the most effective way of getting there for you. And that may not be the same as your friends or the other people in your class or other people that you know. You need to find the way that works best for you, that will help you to develop the skills that you want to learn. And so I'm looking here at some common things that people do to improve their languages, but which may not be the best way for someone that identifies as an introvert. And that's what I wanted to talk about just quickly as well, that sometimes people don't understand what being an introvert is. Sometimes people think it's just shy people, but it isn't. You can be really outgoing and still be an introvert because it's about the way that you deal with social interactions, and maybe you really enjoy social interactions. It's not true that no introverts enjoy social interactions, but they generally wear you out more than they would extroverts. Maybe you can have a good time at a social event, but you need time on your own afterwards because it's like information overload, communication overload. If you don't get some time on your own to recharge your batteries, you will feel really drained. That's the experience that some people have, which is a problem because some of the traditional ways that people say you should learn a language is by doing things that generally suit extrovert personalities more, like go out and talk to as many people as you can find and practice your language skills like that. And for people that don't enjoy doing that anyway, it's just an extra pressure which sometimes you don't need. And sometimes you do need to put yourself in situations where you need to talk to strangers, and that's fine. It's a good skill to have. But there are other things that people with a more introvert personality can do to achieve the same end results, and that's what I want to look at today. So, for example, one piece of advice that people are given for improving their language skills and making their personal learning network, and I've explained what one of those in a previous podcast. I can't remember which number it is, but I will link it in the show notes. If you want to increase your personal learning network, sometimes people say, oh, go and join a language meetup or a group, and meet up with these people and talk to them and do activities with them. And for some people that's great, but if you hate big groups, big gatherings, and you find them really stressful, then doing something online can be a good alternative for you to practice your listening and reading and writing skills. So maybe an online forum is better for you than, say, a meetup group, because you can limit the amount of interaction. If it's too much, you can come back at a time that's good for you. You can read the individual comments rather than having loads of people all talking at once, which can be a bit much or a bit overwhelming at times. So if you do that, then you can be more in control of the amount of communication that you have. And for some people that works better. It doesn't mean that you can't do other things like attending events, but if you generally don't like big events with lots of people, then the internet gives us opportunities to have those conversations, one-to-one conversations with people, without having to go to some kind of big event. And if you want to go to a big event, then you can also plan when you're going to leave. Maybe it's not the whole event. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to stay for an hour and a half, and then I'm going to go home. And that's okay. It's more difficult if it's, I don't know, going to the cinema or something like that. But if it's just an event where people are talking to each other, then you can tell yourself, okay, I'm going to stay here for an hour and then I'm going to go home. And that means that you don't have to stay around until the last people go, because you've already decided in advance. If you don't particularly enjoy these things, then go, but also plan your leaving strategy so you don't have to stay there all evening. Okay, and another thing that people often talk about is listening skills. Sometimes people say, oh, let's go to the cinema and watch an English film, which is great unless you really don't like loud places and lots of visual effects. I know someone who really struggles with that because it's just too loud in the cinema. And if you don't like that, I don't know that's necessarily an introvert thing, but it's definitely a kind of information overload kind of problem where some people just can't deal with a lot of noise at once. But you can still watch that film or do something like that with another language learner. It doesn't have to be in the cinema for you to watch a film. It can be at home. You can go and visit someone, watch it together with them. So it's the same activity, but in a different setting that's more suited to how you learn or where you feel most comfortable. In terms of improving speaking skills, sometimes people say, try and speak to as many new people and make new contacts as you can, which is fine for people who like doing that. But if you're not that person who wants to talk to random strangers, maybe in the queue for the bus or in the shops, if you generally don't start conversations with lots of random strangers, you're going to find it hard if you suddenly have to do that in English. And whilst it's good to have these skills where you can talk to strangers, and often you'll need them if you're going to use your language later, to build up to that, there's no reason why you can't build some good relationships with some language tandem partners that you feel more comfortable with. It doesn't have to always be new people. If you can find some people that are reliable, that will help you, and that you can go to have these conversations, then you can build up to approaching random strangers later. Some people naturally find this easier than others, and if you're not somebody that naturally finds that easy, then build up to it. Make the situations in which you're speaking at first the kind of situations where you want to speak and when you feel comfortable about doing that, and then move on to other things. Don't just jump in at the deep end if that's not something you would want to do in your own language either. So this isn't looking for cop-outs, this isn't looking for avoiding speaking or avoiding difficult situations, but it's just thinking, what do I actually want to achieve at the moment? And is there a way that I can do that that's better suited to my natural behaviours and my needs and the way that I usually like to do things, because ultimately you want to achieve your goals, and so it's good to set things up in a way that will make it more likely that you will achieve them. Another thing is about building vocabulary. And so sometimes people say, okay, well then try and find as many people to talk to online, or join clubs, or, you know, chat on social media. But I know that some people find just random small talk the hardest. It's not the deeper conversations that are a problem for them, it's just random small talk. And if you're somebody like that, then whilst it is good to know some phrases for general small talk and to feel comfortable doing that, because for example at work, before and after meetings, there is some element of that, and maybe at the beginning of meetings, if you call someone up on the phone, you don't want to always charge in straight away with your request. But if the aim of the exercise is to improve your vocabulary and your reading and speaking and writing skills, then there's no reason why you can't find a specific forum that discusses things that you want to talk about. Because if that's more meaningful to you and you really hate what you see as pointless small talk conversations, then, you know, if you want to improve your vocabulary, go and talk about something that you want to talk about. Find forums online that are very specific and related to things that interest you. You don't have to do the same as everybody else and just talk about things that you find boring, because nobody wants to talk about things that they find boring. Some people are more comfortable with the whole small talk thing than others, but if you really don't like it, then find some other places to talk to people online that are more in line with what you want to do. And it's also okay to start with writing. I know some people will say you have to speak right at the beginning, and I don't really go along with that. I think that you should certainly not neglect a skill. If you find it the hardest, then don't neglect it, but there's nothing wrong with building up some confidence writing and communicating with strangers in that way first, and then going on to speaking. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I did that in German, and now I do both speaking and writing, and it's okay. If you do want to speak well, you do have to speak. You can't avoid speaking and expect to speak well, but you certainly don't have to speak all the time if that's not what you want to do. And then finally, I thought I'd mention courses, because there are so many different kinds of courses available, and somebody who doesn't like a lot of, you know, big groups and that kind of interaction is probably going to be better in a course that doesn't focus on games and icebreakers and things like that at the beginning, and lots of moving around and talking to lots of people quickly to get information. Some courses are set up like that, and some people love it. Some people find the games really help them to relax, but for some people that's just horrible and stressful. So if you're somebody who doesn't like learning in a big group, then try to find one-to-one situations where you can learn. So if you can afford it, then there is the option of one-to-one training. If you can't, then also you can learn a lot through language tandems and helping one another in a smaller group setup, so you don't have the pressure from a big group. And also, if you are designing your own learning plan, you can tell the teacher you don't want to do lots of kind of you'll probably have to do some kind of interactive activities, but they can do less of the games type activities or things that make you feel uncomfortable. But if you're in a group course, you haven't really got the ability to help shape where that course goes, whereas if you're working on your own, you can tell the teacher what kind of things you like and what's helpful for you. So I hope those things are helpful. I hope they've given you some ideas about what people with a more introvert personality can do to still get the same skills, but it doesn't have to be in the same way as everybody else in big groups or in situations that naturally make you feel a bit uncomfortable. And like the analogy that I used at the beginning with the station and going a different way, I still got where I was going. For me, it was better going that way. It didn't matter. I wasn't going with most of the other people around me. I don't care where they were going, and they shouldn't have cared where I was going. The point was we all got where we needed to be, and that is the main thing. So whatever your language goals are for 2017, do think about how you're going to achieve them as well as what you want to achieve, because most of the time there are many ways of achieving the same goal, and the best way for you may be different from the best way for other people. So think out about what's going to work best for you, and then design your learning activities around that, with that in mind, how you learn best, what activities help you the most. That doesn't mean you won't have to do things you don't enjoy sometimes. That's life, especially if you're learning for work. But you can make the learning process easier by knowing yourself really well and knowing what kind of things you enjoy. So I hope that is helpful. I wish you all a very happy new year. And if you're listening to this later than December 2016, I hope that you have success in developing your language learning goals. And if anybody is interested in supporting this podcast, just a reminder that you can do that on Patreon, and the link to that is on the show notes page, which you can find at englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 73. And this podcast is also based on a blog article that I wrote, so if you want to read that, I will also include the link to that on the show notes page. So have a great week and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.